Hi, guys, it's Jason. I just wanted to thank everyone who's taken the time to watch or listen to even one episode of Happiness Sold Separately. It's been my hope that we can bring you interesting conversations and hopefully offer a bit of comfort during tough times. Please keep watching and give us a like. It truly helps us grow. Everything is still on sale through the end of the year, and this is, again, just one more way you can help us and help the show. We couldn't do what we do without you and your support. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Please enjoy this episode and Merry Christmas. God willing, we'll see you next year.
Auto sequence start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now, on with the show.
Hi, I'm Ashira Solomon, and my happiness is family.
Okay, Ashira Solomon, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so excited.
Me too. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, there's a lot that I wanted to talk about and ask you, but I'd like to start maybe by just your story, letting people know your story. For some reason, there's this misconception that Israel is made up of only people of one color. You know, it just seems to be a big misconception. How did you come to find yourself moving there? A lot came from your grandmother, right?
Yeah, so my grandmother, she died at 48 years old. I was about 6. But it was her dream to go to Israel, and she told all her kids to go. She had 5 children, and then my mother went on to have 9 children. My aunt went on to have 5 children. So they went on to have big families, and they just never had the time to go. But we grew up with the story of how important it is to go to Israel. So when I became like looking at colleges and universities to go to, I looked at specific universities that had like partnerships with universities in Israel. So all my friends were like going off to Europe and stuff, and I was like, I'm gonna study abroad in Israel. They're like, why?
Were they
So
really shocked by that?
yeah, they were so shocked. They were like, "Why would you want to go to Israel? Like, isn't there a war over there?" They're like, "Come with us to like Italy," and people were going to Germany and China, and I was like,
Mm.
"No, I'm gonna go to Israel." So I went and studied at University of Haifa for a study abroad program. But my story really started with my grandmother and just landing in Israel. Like before I even got off the plane, I was like, "Whoa, I'm at home."
Mm.
And I just felt this sense of home. And at that time, I had traveled a bit. And so I never traveled to a place where it was like, this feels like home. And then I got off the plane and I started to see Israel, and I was just enamored. So that study abroad program was about 3 months. And then I went back to start my graduate program. And I was like, told my advisors, like, listen, I don't want to be here. I want to be in Israel. Is there a
Mm.
way I can like go back and still like graduate? And so my advisor told me about a national security program through the State Department that was highly competitive. And she's like, well, if you win that, they have a flagship program to Israel. So I applied, I won that, and I went back to Israel in 2019 and lived in Jerusalem for a year.
Wow.
Yeah. Then I went back again and lived there in 2022 because I was speaking to my rabbi, and my rabbi was like, "Do you want to go and study in Israel?" And I was like, "Yes." And so then I went back, studied in Israel, did a conversion in Israel, and yeah,
And
I'm in the States now, but I still live in Israel.
so you go back and forth. You kind of share your time there.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
right now, I keep telling people I'm a wandering Jew. I came, I came to Miami just to have a vacation, and then I end up launching my podcast, the Black and Jewish podcast here, and so I've been working on that. And I'm on a show in Israel called The Quad. I'm a co-host there, and that one is more political affairs. But I
Mm.
launched Black and Jewish because I wanted to focus on more culture and dialogue between the two communities.
And the quad is kind of your answer to the view, right? It's got its diversity, but you're kind of talking political issues.
Yeah, so it's all political, public affairs, explaining what's going on in the ground, explaining what's going on in the Middle East. And We're mostly all to the right, but everyone has a very diverse voice and diverse point of view. And but yeah, it's our answer to the View. We call ourselves like the Israeli View. So it was started
Mm.
by Fleur Hassan. She's the main host, and then she went and picked all the co-hosts.
That's awesome. I think it's such a, just to step back to the landing in Israel, I think that's such a beautiful story that you felt that feeling of being at home and your soul was just comforted by
Yeah.
that. And that was why you're just still on the plane, right? You hadn't
Yeah,
even stepped off.
I hadn't even got off. I hadn't seen anything. I was just like, we literally just landed, and I was like, "Woo, I'm at home." And I always tell people, Israel's not like the most beautiful country in the world, right? Like, I love the beauty of Italy, but when I'm in Italy, I don't feel a sense of home. And
Mm,
I remember in 2019, I traveled back to California. I'm originally from California. 4 times that year to see my family back and forth. And it just felt like I was coming to visit California, but Israel was still my home. And I was just like coming to make a visit. And it's just a weird feeling because, I'm born and raised in California. I live in the United States my whole life. So to go somewhere and just feel like, okay, this is where my soul belongs. It was
yeah.
just like a different feeling.
Wow.
And then
No,
another part of the story I never got to tell, or maybe I have told it, but my grandmother was one of 12, six boys
mm,
and six girls. Her youngest sister, my great aunt, in 2019 got to go to Israel with, she came and visited me with my mom, and it was three of us at the Kotel at the Western Wall, the three
mm,
generations. So to
wow.
me, she was like that stand-in for my grandmother, because for her generation, because no one from that generation got to go to Israel. So it was like someone from that generation, my mom's generation, and me, and we were all like just bawling our eyes out. And I
Oh,
remember
man.
before we got to the wall, my mom and I were eating at a restaurant in the old city, and she just started crying. And I was like, "Mom, why are you crying?" And she was like, "This was my mother's dream." My grandmother's name is Rena. She's like, "This is
Oh,
my mother's dream. Like, my grandma, Rena wanted to be here." And I was like, "But Mom, like, you're here now, and Auntie Cindy's here now, and like we're standing in her place for her."
wow. That is so cool. I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing. So your grandmother filled you in and told you you need to go to Israel. Did you have any misconceptions before you went, or did you always just hear so many great stories that you knew what it was going to be like?
Honestly, I didn't have any misconceptions in terms of any like hate for Israel. It was always like love for Israel. When I first went, it was a huge like aha. Like, I knew I was pro Israel, but I didn't know what was going on in Israel. Like, I didn't
Mm,
know the history. So when I went there, I was studying terrorism and response, peace psychology, and of course Hebrew. In my peace psychology class, it was taught by a Jewish woman, but she celebrates the Nakba. And she doesn't believe that Israel is a democratic state.
mm,
And she believed that, the Jews stole it from Palestinians. And her work was to bridge Jews and Palestinians together, but also to have two states. She didn't believe Israel was a legitimate state. So in
mm,
that class, we had a bunch of Zionists as well. So there was tons of arguments. She would bring in Lebanese people. She would bring in pro-Israel people too. She would bring in like tons of diverse voices. So I'd have that class for 3 hours. But before that class, I would have 3 hours of terrorism and response.
mm,
So I would come out like, whoa, this is so heavy, like,
mhm,
what do I believe? What is going on here? And then on top of that, in Haifa, I had roommates. I stayed in the dormitory, and I had two Muslim roommates.
mm.
I'm sorry, they weren't Muslim. I had two Arab roommates. One was Arab Muslim and one was Arab Christian. And then we had a Chinese girl. So we were very diverse in there. And just hearing their stories, like from the Arab Christians' perspective, they loved Israel, like her
Mhm,
family loved Israel. They wanted to remain Israel. She didn't serve in the army because she had the choice to serve or not to serve.
mm,
So she didn't serve, but like her perspective of Israel was great. The Arab Muslim girl, her perspective of Israel wasn't great, So I was just hearing all these stories, all these experiences. The Arab Muslim girl, she would tell me, "Oh, the IDF did this to my cousin, and I had this type of experience." So when I was there for the 3 months, I was just struggling of like, what's going on here? What's the truth? How do you
mm,
actually create peace? But I think the main thing that I came out what came out of that was I was very humbled because
Mm.
as an American, I feel like Americans always feel like we have the answers for
Mm.
everyone else. And I was sitting there and I was thinking to myself, like, how does America think that we can just come here and just solve these people's issues, because it's so deep rooted and
Yep.
not engage with the people on the ground. And then in 2019, I actually had, people don't know this about me, I had a really close Palestinian friend and family in Bet Hanina in East Jerusalem. So they took me to Bethlehem and Husan and
Mm.
Rawabi. Rawabi is like this township in the West Bank, and it's like built up, like beautiful malls, this like $1 million mosque, like all these like rich Palestinians. And when you go to the West Bank, you don't see anything that looks like that. It's always like dirty and trashy, and it just doesn't
Mm-hmm.
look great. And then I struggle with that. I'm like, well, why is there this one township that has like beautiful grand malls with these high end stores? And I walk into these people's apartments, they have chandeliers coming down. So I was
Mm.
getting an array of experiences while I was in Israel. But that first summer there, I just came out, I would say, humbled because, just coming in as like an American thinking everything of like,
Oh yeah,
yeah, we could
we
just
can
make
fix it.
peace. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
and that's how I was taught in school too. Like, if they just do this and this and this, and it was like, no, there's so many different narratives going on. These are actual people's lives. But the Palestinian family that I was friends with, they were a little bit, I wouldn't say they were pro-Israel, but they weren't anti-Jewish. I would
Mm.
say that. Like they owned a store in Bet Hanina, and they had tons of Jewish customers. They grew up with Jews. They weren't anti-Jewish, but they did believe that, like Palestine needed to be a state and that Israel stole their country from them.
Mm.
So even hearing from their perspective, like I would be at their family dinners and I would be like, yeah, yeah, I love Israel. And they'd be like, we call it Palestine. And then
Oh
I'd be like,
wow.
well, it's Israel. But they didn't do a lot of pushback because, like, when you start to be friends with someone, they probably just thought I was an ignorant American or something like that. And I was like, no, but I knew what I was saying. I'm
Yeah.
like, it's Israel.
Right.
Um, so there was some pushback there, but even then, I remember being with that family and going to some weddings and things like that. And I remember thinking, like, wow, on a micro level, just like day to day people, they would like to live in peace, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just day to day, they want to celebrate weddings just like we do. They want to have children just like we do. And on a micro level, I was seeing Jews and Arabs shopping with one another, conversing with one another every day. And
Mm.
I just thought, if we could get these people who actually want peace, could we really create peace? And then, I was just having lots of ideas. I was like, I think it's just on a macro level, the governments around us just don't want peace, because on the
Yeah.
like the day to day of what I was experiencing was, peaceful interactions between Jews and Arabs. I understand that that's not the everyday interaction in Israel, obviously, but I
Right.
did have these small experiences like that, and I thought, wow, we could really create peace, but fundamentally, we do have different ideologies. Like I stand 100% that Israel is a sovereign state. It belongs to the Jewish people. I don't believe that we should be giving land away to Palestinians. I don't, believe there should be a Palestinian state, things like that. But I don't think that that doesn't mean we can't live together in peace under a Jewish state.
Yeah, and like you said, you've seen the little micros of people getting along and living. I think that gives you hope. There's a chance out there. I have been surprised. I don't know if you have, but to see especially this has taken place on college campuses, but all the anti-Israel, the hatred coming out and one-sided toward Palestine. The colonialism argument, that's really on Europe and not really Israel. So it's like, does that bother you to see young people, college kids, not understanding the truth about the whole truth, I guess, about what's going on?
Yeah, it does bother me because they're applying a lens that just does not apply. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like I think I wrote or tweeted something like, "Dear Black people, your beef is not with the Jews; it's with European colonialists." You know,
Hmm.
but even further than that, there was Arab colonialists. Like, if we're going to keep going back and we're going to keep saying, "Well, the colonialists," well, okay, Arabs colonized half of Africa as well. You know, I'm
Hmm.
speaking from the Black perspective because they always talk about, oh, you're supporting the white man when you're supporting
Hmm.
the Jew. And it's like, no, Jews, why? It's like, let's just take it back. Why weren't Jews welcomed in Europe? You know, they were never
Right.
deemed as white. They weren't even deemed as white in America until, I don't know, like the 40s or the 50s, somewhere around there, you know? So all of a sudden, what people want to fight as white supremacy is now applied to the Jew, and that is not the sin of the Jew, the problem of the Jew. That is not the issue of Israel. You know, what's going on in Israel is not an issue of colonialism. I
Hmm.
wouldn't even say that it's so much a fight about land. You know, it really is about an ideology, about, them wanting to have, Muslims wanting to be able to conquer a place, rule a place, implement Sharia law. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yep.
Even some Palestinians, they have recorded, and it's like, we don't really care about the land like that. We want to make sure there's Sharia law around the world.
Mm.
And so this art, like, to ignore the complexities of what's going on in Israel in the Middle East and just to sum it up as colonialism is very ignorant. And I think that college students need to dive a little bit deeper. I mean, obviously, they're not encouraged to think, right?
Right.
They're just
Right.
like, especially American students, I don't know what's going on with them where they just feel, I feel like American students lack a lot of identity, and they lack a lot of like a sense of purpose. So they want
Hmm.
to grab at anything because they don't have purpose here. You know, they're just kind of like all over the place. We're non-binary. They don't know what they are. And so now
Yep.
they're going to go fight for some other people when they could be fighting for themselves and things that are happening here on US soil. But
And
it's
there's
sad to see.
Oh, absolutely. And there's the other narrative that's been pushed. I think that Israel is not accepting of gay lifestyles and alternative lifestyles, but it's just the opposite, right? I've heard you talk about very open. It's the other side. They always talk about uh, gays for Palestine, and but it's like if they knew
Sluts
what
for
would happen if they,
Palestine.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and like I said, right, I was with my Palestinian family in Bet Hanina, and I remember just like one of the cousins thought the cousin was gay, and they were like, "We're gonna go jump him."
oh wow,
They were like having this hard discussion in the family, and they were like, "Okay, we're gonna go jump him," and I'm like, "Wow,"
mm,
they do not understand, like, you can as a LGBTQ plus however many letters there are now, you do not have that type of freedom in their world, you know what I mean, or
hmm,
in their society. And if there was a Palestinian state, gays would not be able to be openly gay there. You know what I mean?
mm,
Jews would not be safe in a Palestinian state. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Christians would not be safe in a Palestinian state. We would not be safe in a Palestinian state. And the fact that gays for Palestine and sluts for Palestine
yeah.
exist is asinine.
Yeah.
Like, it's
No, really.
ludicrous.
It really is. And I think I've heard you say too, I think that the answer is not one state, right? It's got to be some sort of, there are values of Israelis and ideas that need to be held true and not be forced and bullied into the Palestinian state.
Yep, exactly. And so, in terms of like two state, one state, two state is, something that America wants. But I just really believe that's off the table for Israelis right now. The Israeli people, I think, were very, in favor of a two-state solution. Well, not everyone, but half and half. But after
Hmm.
October 7th, I don't ever see that happening. So where we go, how we move forward, there's many ideas. There's the one state idea. There's, us taking back the West Bank to call it Judea and Samaria, which I stand by because it is Judea and Samaria. So what the future looks like, I'm not sure as well, but we will have to rethink what's going to happen with Gaza, what's going to happen with Judea and Samaria. But this idea that we're going to split Jerusalem and half of Jerusalem can go to them, and like, no, that's not going to work. Jerusalem belongs to the Jews.
Yep, absolutely. And I feel like, in your mind, do you feel the people, when you're talking about going to the weddings and you're there with the people, you feel like both sides just want to live their lives and go to have weddings and have kids? And do you think the governments get too caught up in what the people don't want? People just want peace, right? They want to kind of coexist. Or what's your thought on that?
So, and I want to be clear that I'm speaking from the perspective of the family that I knew in their family who they brought me around, just because I know there's this narrative out about innocent Gazan civilians and what's going on with the Gazan civilians, and we know majority of them celebrated October 7th, so it's not reflective of kind of what my experience is and what I'm saying. But the family that I was with, they took me to Ramallah. I remember we went out in Ramallah and they said, hide your Magid David and do not speak Hebrew here, right? And I was like, okay, my Magid David is so small, but I'm like, we can only, you guys don't communicate that well in English, and I don't know Arabic, so like, what am I supposed to do?
What do we do here?
Yeah. But, they were like, well, just, like, be mindful. But because when I was over there, most of the Palestinians just thought, like, I'm a Black American. They didn't assume that I was Jewish or Ethiopian Jew. So that kind of gave me a bit of a pass in that way. And so that family, from that perspective, I could see, like, they want peace, and they would take me to their other families, and I could see that they just wanted to live their lives. But they also knew that's not the reflection of everyone around them if they're telling me to hide my Magen David and I can't speak Hebrew. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah. But my day-to-day experiences with going within their family, it was just beautiful to see. They were just like my family. They had lots of children. I'm one of 9. They would have 10 children as well. And they'd just be eating and trying to live their life, trying to go to work, trying to make money, and trying to pay their bills,
Wow. But it's just there. You go back to that. Well, we're not going to speak Hebrew. It's like there is no tolerance there for what your values would be, right? I mean,
exactly.
They would accept you, but there's a certain line there that they wouldn't cross. Wow. Do you when you go back home?
Was comfortable. They knew around them it was not comfortable.
Right. So they didn't want to really rock the boat in any way. I guess if someone saw someone out in public, maybe. Wow. When you come back home, do your friends, did they understand now about you living in it? Did they ask you a lot of questions like, oh, you're Black and you're in Israel? Do you not have any rights, or what's that like? Do your friends still kind of have these misconceptions?
So my godmother, I remember the first time I went to Israel, she was like, what is it like over there? Like, do you need to cover your hair? Like, she thought, like, I don't know, I was going to be over there in some hijab or something. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what she was thinking. And I was like, no, like, half of Israelis are naked. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, they don't understand that Israel is actually a very secular society. And, like, the religious population is a smaller population, And so that was her conception of that. My friends, not so much. My best friend actually came to Israel, and she visited me when my mother and aunt came, and she loved it. She had a great time, and she's Asian, and she's like, Israelis are so nice. I want to move here. All my siblings who have visited all have wanted to move there. Like, I always have positive feedback. The questions I get are from people who don't know me. So if I'm going to the hair salon, I always tell this story. I went to the hair salon in San Diego. This lady was from, I think, Alabama or Georgia. She's like, oh, I like your skirt. And I said, thanks. I got it in Israel. She's like, what are you doing over there? I said, I live there. And she was like, oh, don't they hate Black people over there? How are you living? And I said, no, they don't hate Black people. And then I thought, why did she think that? Like, why did you assume that they hate Black people? And she was like, well, I seen on the TV that, they hate Black people over there. They don't be treating the Blacks right. And she's like, are you sure you can be Black in Israel? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, and they like Black women? And I'm like, well, Black women live there. You know what I mean? She's like, really? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, well, I just thought they weren't doing the refugees right. And
Mm.
so then I was like, oh, okay. Well, that's like a policy situation. That doesn't really have anything to do with, the color of your skin per se,
Yeah,
Like
right.
someone maybe could make an argument that, refugees from Africa versus refugees from anywhere else maybe are treated better. I don't know because I don't know the refugee politics of Israel.
Right.
But I was seeing that she was assuming that Israel is racist based off of how they treat refugees. And I'm
Mm.
like, well, no, not necessarily. Like that's a really complex issue that's happening in Israel, and the
Hmm.
refugees coming over and not doing so well in society and bringing their other values and not being law abiding and things like that. So anyways, I told her all about Israel. I was like, you should go. She's like, well, I want to go because I want to see where Jesus walked. And I'm like, you should. She's like, but I'm scared because I'm a
Mm.
black woman. And I said, and I'm a black woman and I lived there 3 times and I live there and it's fine.
Yeah.
And so it's mostly from people who don't know me and they hear that I live in Israel. Their first question is like, how are they treating black people over there?
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
like, we're getting treated just fine.
Right.
I always like to say, like, it's very interesting. I know this statement will be kind of like a wow statement for, people in America, but like being a black woman in America in Israel is the most free
Hmm.
because I'm not seen as a black woman in
Oh.
Israel. I'm just seen as a woman. Like when I go to the synagogues in Israel, no one is like double, like I'm not exotic. I don't stick out. You know what I mean? It's
Mm.
not like if I'm in America and I walk into a synagogue, majority of American Jews here are Ashkenazi. So I stick out. They're like, who's this black girl? You know what I mean?
Right. What's she doing here? Yeah.
Yes. It's like, are you Jewish? It's like, yes, I'm Jewish. But in
Mm.
Israel, it's not even a thought. Like they just come up to you, they start speaking Hebrew to you, and they're like, oh, okay, you're American, because you're like, whoa,
Wow.
whoa, slow down. I don't speak so much Hebrew. But it's really a freedom. Like you can just be like, I don't see myself as like I don't walk into places and I'm like, oh, I'm black. Like I need to be
Right.
aware of the fact that I'm black and something could happen to me here. That doesn't happen in Israel. So you can just like be in Israel.
Do you think that's a difference of us in America that we have gotten into this role where we look and identify everything that's different about each other instead of acceptance right off the bat? I mean, I feel like we constantly divide ourselves, and the media helps, but we don't look at what we have in common, which is much more than we have different.
Yeah, I think it's just because of, the history of America versus the history of Israel. Yes, there have been cases of racism and things like that in Israel, but for the most part, everyone gets discriminated against
Hmm.
equally. Like people talk about the Russians, they talk about the Bulgarians, they talk about everybody. It's not based on skin color, and because of America's history, we just can't get away from this our race-based
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah.
And I hope that we move forward. I mean, it's 2024. We've made leaps and bounds, but we still see everything through the lens of race, unfortunately. And it's only getting worse with the far left and the, wokeism and woke religion and what Black Lives Matter did, just
Hmm.
still trying to highlight that we have race wars in America. I don't think we have race wars in America, but I think that people are still very much aware of their race whenever they're going somewhere, which I think we should just like move past now.
It's easy hanging fruit, isn't it? I mean, it's like the first thing you go to try to blame or like bring up why a certain thing is happening. It just seems like race used to like being called a racist. That used to be. Now it's just like it's used so much that it's lost its power because
Like, what
if
does
you're,
that mean? Everyone's
yeah,
racist now.
right, right. What is it?
I also
Yeah.
don't think that like when it comes to racism, I don't think that that is our like that should be our goalpost of we need to eradicate racism. It's
Mm,
like we are human beings, right?
right,
We innately are tribal.
right.
We come with flaws. We're born with these type of flaws. And so I don't really think our goal should be to eradicate racism because there's always gonna be a people who don't like you for whatever reason. And
Mm,
I just feel like that's such a lofty goal, and it shouldn't even be a goal, you know? Our goal should be that we should be, you know, surrounded by people who share our same values, our same ideas, and that we should push forward good values and good ideas in strong families, right? That we should be building strong families with mothers and fathers and children, making sure that strong women are marrying strong men, producing strong children so we can have a strong nation. I don't think that our focus should be like, there can't be any racists in America. We need to get rid of, and if you have any racism in your heart, we need to figure out how to get that out of you. And it's like,
It's
you know,
a,
like, I don't know, like, what?
it's an
Where are
unattainable
we going with
goal,
that?
right? Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
it looks good on paper, but I feel like you said it. We're tribal. I mean, look at the Bible. This has gone on for centuries, so it's not. I don't think that's going anywhere, unfortunately, anytime soon. But it's all in how we deal with that and how we try to make a difference where we can and try to put a dent in it, you know, and change the narrative of that where we can. And that's, like you said, all about who we associate with and what we're trying to do with the family. I feel like we've lost our way in the family so much. I feel like that should be number one. I feel like that a lot of good things would happen if we would just go back to that.
I think so too. Especially being in Israel, one of the things that I loved about living in Israel, especially when I was there in 2019. I told you the first time I went, 2016, I came back very humbled, like, okay, I don't know everything. 2019, when I came back like, wow, family is the most important value in life. Like God and family. And it was Israel that taught me that, because before then I was working in DC and I was very much like, you know, finishing my master's degree, wanting to like be a future politician, wanting all these things. And I remember I went to Israel and I was surrounded by families all the time. And I grew up one of nine, so I know what it means to be in a family. But I realized in America, they weren't instilling in me to desire family. All I desired was, I got to get back to DC. I got to, you know, climb, you know, this corporate ladder. I have to be the greatest, the best. I need to have my voice out there. Everything was career focused. And when I came back from Israel in 2018, I was like, oh, I need to like build a family. That's what's most important. Like, it doesn't matter how far I get in my career. That's not going to be my only fulfillment. Like, I need a husband and I need children. In Israel, like, all you see in Jerusalem are families walking around together, you know, the husband pushing the stroller, you know, even the husbands, they're strapped up with the baby. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's
Yeah.
like, and I was watching people and it was like, they work to live and we in America live to work. And I came back and I like dropped that whole like boss babe mentality. It doesn't mean that I don't believe women can't be great in their careers. It just means that I finally had my eye-opening experience to say, like, career will not be our only fulfillment. And we've been sold that career will be our most fulfilling thing in our life. And it's a lie. And I hope every young woman who's watching this takes heed to what I'm saying and puts more effort and focus into having children and getting married, because it doesn't just come to you naturally. Like, just like you put your effort into your career, you have to do the same thing with trying to get a family and build a family. And I remember I was in Israel, I was working at this think tank, and they did a study on fertility rates in Israel, and among Jewish women and among Arab women, and then among Jewish women that lived in Europe and Mexico and the U.S. And they found that women, Jewish women specifically living in Israel, who had higher education up to master's or PhD, they were still having the same amount of kids as the national rate in Israel, but they would just have them later. So they didn't opt out of having children. They would just have them later in their 30s. But in America, the higher the education of the woman, the less children she has. So the American woman is not saying, okay, I want to focus on my career, I'll just have them later. They're just not having them at all.
Wow.
And in Israel, and they were finding that Arab Israeli women were having the same patterns as American women. So Arab Israeli women, if they had higher education, they stopped having children or had less. And so we were like, what is it about the Jewish Israeli woman, because Jewish women as well in the other countries were having the same stats as American women in Europe. And so they were trying to figure out what is it about the Jewish Israeli woman that even though she has higher education, she still makes sure to have kids, even if it's later in life, you know? And so they came up with all these ideas like, well, maybe because we have such close family ties, because they have grandmother and grandpa living nearby and they can have babysitters. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's because, you know, you can take off work for a year and still come back and have your job. They couldn't pinpoint the reason, but I thought that was beautiful that women weren't opting out. Jewish Israeli women weren't opting out to have children, even though they had higher education.
Wow. And that's something that I think young women here should, I mean, at least contemplate, right? And the media, I think, pushes that narrative. I mean, the baby rate being down and family values being down, and that's always now being looked upon as old fashioned. I think. I mean, there's a
Mm-hmm.
narrative out there that pushes that, and ultimately, like you said, young women here in America, they strive for that. And it's almost like family is, if thought at all, is very down on their agenda, very on their priority. So I
You
hope
know,
that changes.
I think it's a reflective of our maturity level in America. Like,
Hmm.
I find it to be very immature that people are not taking a second to think about death,
Yeah.
legacy, what's going to happen to your legacy, your last name, who you'll be after you die. And when people are just like, "Oh, I don't want kids at all," I think that's a minority of people who you know will have that space in the world. But majority of us, I think it's reflective of us being very immature, our
Hmm.
young people being very immature, because you're not thinking about death and not thinking about that you won't be here later. And to me, especially for, you know, if I'm going to follow a leader, for me, I don't think I could ever vote for someone who hasn't had children, right?
Mm.
Like when I'm looking at President Trump, right? One of the things I love about President Trump is looking at his family. It's not to say that they are perfect, but they are intact. Versus when
Right.
you look at Joe Biden's kids, right? Not so intact. And
Right.
it says a lot about a man who can be a leader if he can lead his wife and he can lead his children, you know? And I think
Mm.
we should start judging people on like, okay, you want to lead me, but how did you lead your family? Because
Mm.
that's your first line of leadership. And I believe that good leaders are good family leaders first before they can be a good leader for me.
Very true, because you're also, what that does also is it creates empathy and it creates an understanding of not only your employees in a business, but if you can build that business with the same kind of values and empathy that you have towards your family, I think that makes for great leadership. Um, I don't think there's any to show your vulnerability and show your side of caring and empathy, that I don't think that makes you weak, especially as a man. I think that only makes you more emotionally intelligent, I think, to know what's kind of going on.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Do you if we can, let's talk about October 7th just for a little bit. Were you there at that time? What was that like that day? Yeah.
That was a heavy day. So yeah, I was in Israel for October 7th. It was okay. So I'm Orthodox, so I keep Shabbat, and I normally never ever leave Jerusalem to go spend Shabbat anywhere else. And that weekend happened to be a good friend of mine's birthday, so she said,
Mm.
"Let's do Shabbat in Tel Aviv, and then after Shabbat's over, we'll go out and celebrate her birthday." And I was like, "Okay." And I remember I talked to my mom that day, and she was like, "Just don't go." And I was like, well, I already committed because I was telling her I was a little bit tired. And she's like,
Hmm.
just don't go. And then she said, I don't feel like you should be in Tel Aviv. And I was like, I'm just going to go because I already said I would go. So we get to Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is a whole different beast than Jerusalem for Shabbat. Like the parties, the clubs, the bars are still going, you know? So you're
Hmm.
like, in Jerusalem, everything's quiet on Shabbat. In Tel Aviv, you're like, you can't really feel it, but you're trying to feel it, but there's parties going on around you. So we go out. It's Simchat Torah, the time that we dance around the Torah and celebrate. So we go out that Friday night to the synagogue. We pray. We dance with the Torah. We go back to our Airbnb. I wake up to huge like boom sounds. But I'm thinking it's just construction because I'm like, it's Tel Aviv. Like, they don't stop doing things on Shabbat. So I'm like, maybe I just thought it's construction. I live in Jerusalem, so I don't hear rockets being intercepted. I haven't had that experience in Jerusalem. So my friends are like, we're gonna go to the synagogue in the morning to pray, and I'm like, okay, I'll meet you guys later. I'll be there around lunchtime because I want to sleep in. They go, they come back, and they're like, Ashira, we're under attack. I'm like, what? And they're like, all the IDF soldiers who were at the shul, at the synagogue, they had to leave. The rabbis are like, stay at home. But the way my friends are describing it is as if we have jihadists all over Tel Aviv. They're cutting off people's heads in the streets. They're shooting up people. We don't know everything that's going on, but they're in our country. They're everywhere. And I'm like freaking out. And I'm like, and my one friend is like, well, I'm still going to go to the synagogue. Like, nothing's going to stop me from praying. But it's like maybe like a 10-minute walk from where we're staying. So I'm like, I'm not going to the synagogue. Like, I'm not leaving this house. And then she's like, okay, well, when you hear the siren, you only have 30 seconds. So you need to go under the stairs because where we were, it didn't have a bomb shelter. So she's like, you need to stand under the stairs. And I'm like, oh my goodness, because I've never heard sirens in Jerusalem. And these people are from Tel Aviv, so they're used to it. And I'm just like freaking out, freaking out, freaking out. So eventually I open my phone because, I break Shabbat. We don't use our phones on Shabbat. And I have all these text messages from my sister and my mom, and they're freaking out. And they're like, are you safe? And I'm like, I think so. I don't know. I'm just going to wait here till Shabbat's over. I don't know what to do. And then they're like, okay, just like keep us updated. So I turn my phone off and I just stay in the apartment the whole day. My friends are like brave. They're like walking back to me, bringing me food from the synagogue and then going back to the synagogue. And I'm like thinking like, y'all are crazy because we didn't know that it's not in our area. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like when they're saying they're walking around cutting people's heads off, I don't know if that's like on my street. So I'm like, why do they keep going outside? Because we don't have any information. And on top of that, for us, it's Shabbat. So it's not like we're like really on our phones. I mean, I opened my phone to contact my family and that was it. So Shabbat's over and I'm, getting a taxi to get back to Jerusalem. And all the taxis are Arab drivers. And mostly they are in Israel, but and before this, I would never be afraid to ride with an Arab driver as a taxi driver, right? But I'm seeing all the names, they're all Arab, they're all Arab. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like how am I gonna get home? Like I can't go with an Arab driver, there's no Jewish drivers, etc. So one pops up and I'm like, forget it. I just have to do it. It's an Arab driver. So we're driving. I'm sharing my location with everyone. And he's talking to me like normal.
Oh,
And
wow.
and he's a normal, nice guy, like as if nothing's happening in the country right now. And he's just like, so where are you from? Yeah, I had to go to the airport. He's just having casual conversation. And I'm in the back, like stuck, because I'm like, is he gonna kidnap me?
Oh my gosh.
Because like I don't understand what's happening. And I'm thinking it's happening everywhere. Because people, even when I wanted to leave to Jerusalem, they were like, don't even leave to go to Jerusalem. Like, it's not even safe to leave. Like, a rocket could fall on you. This could happen. Like, we don't know what's going on. So I'm in the car and we're passing an Arab village. And he starts to tell me that he lives there. And I'm like getting so scared, like, oh my gosh, he's about to take me to his Arab village and I don't know what he's going to do to me? And normally I'm telling you, this is not my normal thought process any other day, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, I live right over there. And he's like slowing down so he can show me. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And he's
Right.
telling me I'm pretty. And I'm like, oh
Oh.
gosh. So I'm just like nervous. But anyways, I get back home. He gets me home. It turns out he just wanted to talk and flirt. Just a regular guy. I get
Right.
back home. And I just stay in my apartment. I'm like locked in there. Don't leave. Jerusalem is shut down. Jerusalem had sirens go off, which normally doesn't happen for Jerusalem. The whole city's silent. It's quiet for the next couple of days.
Wow.
No one is out in the streets. And when I say no one, no one. Everyone's buying up water. The grocery stores were still open. All the restaurants are closed. Everything's just shut down. No one's going anywhere. I know a lot of synagogues started to announce that they were going to like pray and fast and things like that. But other than that, there was no movement. I didn't leave my home. And then I get a call from Fleur Hassan, and she's like, we have to launch our show now because
Mm.
after October 7th, maybe 2 days after, like the first day, the media was like on the side of Israel, and then 2 days after, they were like smashing us in the media, like this didn't happen or it's not real, rapes didn't happen, all these things are coming out.
Mm.
So the quad was launched like just a few days after October 7th,
Oh,
and
wow.
we were in studio telling our stories, and then we were there week after week. I went to Kibbutz Be'eri, one of the kibbutz that they went to and slaughtered a bunch of people. And we were like on the ground maybe 2 weeks after October 7th, maybe a week and a half or so. Enough where the blood was still on the ground and the
Mm.
smell of dead bodies was still in the air. And it was us and a bunch of other journalists, and everyone could do their job, and I could not do my job. I was just like crying. It was awful. Like I walked into a house, you seen all the knives, like the knives that they butchered people with, all on the
Mm.
ground. You're
Mm.
you're stepping in dry blood. It's like most of it's been dried, but like it's still on your shoe.
Mm.
We went into the home. The home is still like intact in terms of you can see that there was a kitchen table there. And sorry, I'm getting emotional. And you can see that their pictures are up. And then you walk into the child's room and you see all these bullet holes in the child's bedroom. And you see all this blood on a child's mattress. And but you can see it was a little girl's room. Like the room is painted pink, and you see the books and everything in all her clothes and all her shoes, you know? And then you walk into their bathroom, there's just blood stains everywhere down the bathtub, and like they just slaughtered this family. Then we go to our next house. The next house, they found 19 bodies in
Mm.
that house. We go to another kid's room, and I see his geometry books, his algebra books, and all these books that this little boy was studying. And it's like, and they burnt half the house down. Half the house was
Mm.
burnt down, and it was just sad. And then they showed us pictures of some of the body parts that they found, because they started to find people's body parts, but they didn't know who it belonged to. And then we met one of the officers that found the head of a baby. And so he had a picture of that. It
Mm.
was awful.
Brutal.
And on top of that, while we're down there, all you're hearing is boom, 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 because they're intercepting the rockets. But it feels like the boom that you're hearing is the interception, but it feels like rockets are landing, like
Mm.
they're about to
Mm-hmm.
land on us. So that was just like from October 7th being in Tel Aviv to going to Kibbutz Be'eri, like it was all so traumatizing.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I came to the States, even just this past month, this last month, I finally went to California for a month to stay with my
Mm-hmm.
family, that I actually like got a deep cry. And I didn't realize that I was still so traumatized from what I saw and what I experienced. People ask me like, "How do you deal with anti-Semites online, and how's that affecting your mental health?" And I'm like
Yeah.
laughing, like, "Who cares if they call me a nigger or a bunch of times or a Zio?" Like, our mental health is the fact that we had to see blood on the ground, that we have to see, children's rooms of children being slaughtered in their rooms. That's the trauma. People online, who cares, about comments? The real trauma is that, you're running from rockets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the trauma.
Who cares
That
about some idiot on social media? That's so
No,
sad.
and
Yeah.
and I don't mean to disregard people who have been bullied online and that really affects them day to day. But after living in Israel, I can never go back to living that weak and that soft. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like
Right.
ever in my life, I can never complain about a comment that even someone made to me, even if it's face to face, or a comment someone said on social media. And so I just want to tell people, like, that really doesn't matter. Like when you're in a life and death situation, that's what's going to affect your mental health. Those things, let it go. It doesn't matter.
Mm. Wow. Gosh, that is I couldn't I'm like you, I wouldn't be able to do my job if I was out there. I mean, I worked in television news for a long time, but not, I saw a lot of things, but that's whenever you have that kind of imprint on your brain and your soul and you see that much just horror, it's hard to let that go. I mean, that'll be with you forever.
Yeah, a lot of people, I remember my rabbi, I told him before we went, I said, should I go? And he said, listen, you're going to have nightmares after.
Hmm.
Your soul's going to be very disturbed for a long time. But it's also important that you go so you can stick up for your people. You have to witness so that you can be a voice for your people. And I said, okay. And he was right. I had nightmares for days after, thinking someone was coming into the house, going to
Mm.
kill me. I couldn't sleep in my bedroom. I could only sleep in my living room. Like the nightmares were so heavy. I remember I left to Italy just for a quick break for a week, to just get out of there, like during November. Like,
Hmm.
so like a month after, I was just like, I just need a break, you know? And
Yeah.
it's crazy because Israelis, it's normal for them. Like I had my neighbor say, oh, is this your first war?
Oh,
And I
wow.
was like, yeah, they're like you'll get through it, you know?
Yeah.
And
Isn't
I
that
had my
amazing? Wow.
Yeah, and I had my Israeli friends, they would be like, let me bring you some food and stuff because this is your first time going through it, you know?
So they
And
just
like,
hunker down and they just try to live their life through it. I mean,
yeah, like it
yeah.
doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't affect them. It definitely affects them, but not in the way of an American who's first time experiencing it, one.
Yep.
And two, as an American, we have never, or, in my lifetime, I've never experienced a war on our land. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
On our grounds and having to live like that and having an enemy so close to you. You know what I mean? We just
Yeah.
don't have it and we just don't know that experience. And so in a lot of ways I'm grateful for the experience because it made me just hunker down even more on my values of life and to understand that life can be so cheap. Because in the Middle
Yeah.
East, life is really cheap because it can be taken like this. And yes, I know we have crime in America and everything, and your life can be taken anywhere you are. But I don't think people understand like the things that we worry about, that we meditate on, that we are concerned about, they're not that big of a deal. Like
Hmm.
the things that we fight over, the things that we won't forgive our family members over, all of that goes out the window when you're in life and death situations. And I'm grateful that I went through that because I feel like I live life from my heart now, from my soul, and I take it a lot more seriously than before.
Yeah. I mean, if any problem that we have here, we're not being woken up to rockets going overhead or people busting in our door and slaughtering our family. So,
Like
yeah.
it's not normal for us. Like if it happens to us, school shootings, these things, like these things are not in our psyche as normal. Like you have to
Hmm.
understand over there, it's in their psyche as this is normal. This is just what happens. And
That's what
you'll
we
get
have to
through it,
deal with.
Ashira. It's your first war here. You'll get through it and we'll have many more, you know? And
Mm.
so for right now, here's some comfort. We're gonna try to help you, but you'll get through it. Oh, so I
Let's
was
just
saying
get
I went
through it.
to Italy for a week, just to like get out. And then you kind of feel guilty about leaving as well because you're
Mm.
like, there's soldiers fighting and like you're going off because you can't take it in and there's mothers and wives who are losing their husbands and their sons and their daughters and their wives, everyone is
Mm.
fighting. And little on me, I'm like, I need a break. So I leave. And I remember the day I came back, I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I can do this again. Like I can, get back to my show and fight again. And I
Mm.
remember that day that I landed outside of Jerusalem at the bus stop, they had shot up a rabbi, a young pregnant woman, and a teenager. And I was just like, it's just not gonna stop. It's just not gonna stop. And
Wow.
the girl who was pregnant, she had just got married. She only been married like a year. She was like 8 months pregnant or something like that. And she's just done. Her life is over.
Wow. Her life and an unborn
And her unborn,
child.
and
Wow.
not to say like, the old people who die, it's not sad, but when you see a young mother and a pregnant woman just shot up at the bus stop, it's just like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
And I don't say that to make Israel sound scary because I always say Jerusalem is such a safe place to live. It
Yeah.
really truly is. Like I walk around Jerusalem 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning by myself. I'm from a very safe city in California, and I wouldn't do that here, you know? So
Yeah.
in terms of like crime and people robbing you and things like you don't worry about those things. You know what I mean? People are so helpful and everything. But when there are terrorist attacks, it's serious, you know?
So that's a whole different ball game when you have that
Hmm.
going on, for sure.
Yeah.
Ashira, thank you so much. This has been I'm so honored that you would come on, and this is great conversation. You're such a wonderful person doing great work. So never
Thank you for
stop.
having
Never
me.
stop.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's awesome. Come back when you can. I'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe we can do it in person.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love that. I'd love that. That maybe we'll have all these technical problems, right? All these things.
Exactly.
Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
You can find me on Instagram at Real Ashira Solomon, and it's Ashira with an Ashira Solomon. And you can find me on X, Ashira_Solomon. You can also follow the Black and Jewish podcast on Rumble. Right now it's exclusively on Rumble, but it will be coming to Spotify and Apple Podcasts very soon. So go and support that. And you can also find me on LinkedIn if you're there, Ashira Solomon.
Very cool. I have to watch out for that for the show. Absolutely. That's great. Well, thank you so much, my friend. It was really a great time. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Happiness Sold Separately is created and hosted by Jason Hensley and is produced by Makash Films. Music by Soundstripe. Narration by Lauren Gobis. If you or someone you know is in crisis and needs immediate help, call the National Mental Health Hotline at 866-903-3787. We would be honored if you would rate, share, and subscribe. From the entire Happiness Sold Separately team, thank you for listening.